let's talk about the coffee market, because currently it's gone crazy. So, to give a bit of context to this, I'm trying to make this video in light of how the coffee market has behaved over the last few months, particularly the last few weeks, actually. But also because there's been a lot of conversation in the coffee industry about how the coffee market is moving, and there's a lot of fear and uncertainty within coffee professionals, from coffee roasters, exporters, importers, and the producing side as well. But there hasn't been much conversation from our end, kind of the roasting side to the end consumer side. And before we start seeing lots of stuff going out on major media, which I'm sure will happen eventually, kind of wanted to spark some kind of conversation, because we are now at a point in our own company where we're having to put our prices up to our wholesale partners and our online customers from the start of March. So what has happened since kind of last January, there were some effects of climate change, so lots of frost in Brazil happened. There was also drought. So there's been lots of different climate change things affecting some of the major coffee growing regions around the world. And particularly in Brazil, Brazil is one of the largest producers of coffee in the world. Like over 60% of Arabica is produced in Brazil. And that then leads on to the coffee market speculation saying, okay, so there's going to be less Arabica coffee available. Basic supply and demand. Now, the bit that gets confusing, a lot of people don't understand or don't know, because why would you know unless you're in the industry, is that all coffee, regardless of it being specialty coffee or commodity coffee, basically all coffee, caveat a few minor things here and there, but I'm not going to muddy this up by going into those kind of specifics. But the majority of all coffee in the world is traded off of the commodity stock markets. So you have London Robusta and you have New York Arabica. Obviously London is priced in pounds, and that's pounds per metric ton. Pounds as in Great British pounds. And in New York it is priced on the dollar, and that is dollar per pound, pound as in weight, pound. Just if that wasn't clear, because it still confuses me sometimes. So 2.2 pounds roughly to a kilo for all of us European side of the world. And that's where things start to get a little bit confusing. So to kind of break this down and to help you understand what's going on, I'm going to start back on what commodity coffee is. Not in terms of like what is specialty versus commodity, but what is coffee on a commodity stock market, because coffee is a commodity, it's an agricultural crop traded off a commodity stock market. So we've got the New York Arabica stock market, and it is traded like anything else on the stock market, like oil, gold, gas. They are all commodities traded on the stock market. There's supply and demand, there's hedging, there's speculation. Lots of things that I don't properly understand, and there are smarter people who definitely do, so I'm just trying to give like a very explaining it like I'm five type understanding of it. If you want more in-depth conversations on stock markets and how they work, there are plenty of other people. I would recommend a podcast with a guy called Stuart Ritson on the Coffee Knowledge podcast. Very worthwhile listening to if you want to know more about the in-depth of how the commodity markets, particularly in coffee, work. So we've got this commodity stock market in New York that trades coffee. There is a base price, basically, that this commodity market sets, and that is built off supply and demand and speculation, essentially. So when traders are selling coffee to the market, there will be other traders buying it for X amount. When we start hearing news of climate change effects, so droughts, frosts in Brazil, anything that could affect the yields of coffee, particularly in large growing regions. And we've seen that from Vietnam, that grows the most of the world's Robusta, and in Brazil. This is when we get into speculation of, well, there's not going to be as much yield, so there's not going to be as much supply of said coffee. And then we've also got geopolitical issues that are going on around the world, civil wars and wars in like trading routes and all sorts of things. And then we've also got foreign exchange. So obviously New York market, dollar, the foreign exchange from dollar to euro, dollar to pound, also dollar to peso in Colombia, for example, can all affect how exporters and importers are going to work on their structuring of coffee coming in. So all of this stuff going on, and basically, like I said, from last January, there was reports of frost in Brazil, which was going to give a lower yield, which it did. And then that's kind of slowly sparked on this higher and higher pricing, to the point where now we are, I think at the time of recording this, it's gone just back under 420 cents per pound. It might be 427. It did break 430 yesterday. When I'm saying 430, that is 430 cents per pound weight of coffee. So 2.2 pounds to a kilo, looking roughly $9 a kilo of coffee. And that sets essentially the base price of coffee. So we're using the commodity stock market as the coffee market baseline. And this is a baseline for average coffee. So it's not amazing coffee that you can shout about. It's not disgusting, dirty, mouldy, defective coffee. It's your sort of baseline. This is coffee, I will drink it. And there is sort of grading for it if you want certified stock coffees. But it's, the C market essentially works for the rest of the commodity world in terms of coffee commodity as a baseline pricing for coffee and what coffee is bought from producers at. So there's a baseline there. In world of specialty, typically there would then be premiums on top of this baseline, and that's where the whole story of specialty coffee has always been so much better than commodity coffee, because we pay extra premiums for extra quality and everything else. And this is where, in terms of the specialty industry, we're going to start seeing some interesting things. So we're looking at $9 a kilo as a base price, potentially, if this is sustainable. Where's the incentive for a producer to keep growing and producing specialty coffees if their cost of production hasn't increased as much? We might not see as much specialty coffee because the cost of production and the extra effort required to get the same amount back, potentially even more back, as producers have historically been living on the poverty line, if not below, and the cost of production over the last sort of 5 years has gotten higher and higher and higher. We don't know, we can only, again, speculate that a coffee producer might not want to spend that extra effort, that extra money creating specialty coffee, and totally don't blame them for the side of the world and the side of the industry that has been fucked over for the last few years. Probably say more than the last few years. I wouldn't blame them for doing that. But there will still be specialty coffee, and if this baseline price continues the way it is, then specialty coffee will likely become even more specialty and even rarer, which is fine. It is what it is. On the other side of that, there's fear and uncertainty from the producing side. I've been chatting to our friends in Colombia, because they don't necessarily hedge all of their coffees. They buy it with producers at the base price and then add premiums, as do a lot of exporters and producers and cooperatives. There's also uncertainty that if they start purchasing from smallholders and other farms now at this high price, and then all of a sudden this high ceiling base price drops and it bursts, then they're going to be sat on a lot of stock that is very, very expensive and might not shift, and it's going to take a long time to shift. So there's just a lot of uncertainty in the whole world of specialty coffee. Now, where this comes in our side as the coffee roaster, I think we as a business have been fairly fortunate for this year, at least for 2025, where I was kind of forward-thinking enough. I'd started to see a little bit of a hike in the coffee market. I'd purchased a bunch load of forward contracted coffee at a decent price. I've then forward contracted another chunk just as the year was coming in, and it was starting to creep up even higher. So I've kind of taken what will become an average for the rest of the year, and our prices have gone up. They're going up on the 1st of March, like I said, but that's going to be it for the year. Like, we're not going to have any other increases for the year, touch wood. I don't know what that's going to mean for other coffee roasters and other importers around the UK, around Europe, around the world, who maybe aren't as forward contracting, or don't have the ability to forward contract as well, particularly smaller coffee roasters. There's going to be some difficulty in there. Now you're buying spot coffees. Spot coffee, for anybody who doesn't know, is essentially a coffee that is just off the shelf. So rather than forward contracting and saying to our exporter or importer or producers, like, I want to buy 50 bags of coffee at roughly this much, and we pre-contract that, you can buy spot coffees, which are, some people it is a fixed price and they've bought it in at a fixed and they will sell it at a fixed and they have their fixed margin. Other importers have a hedged pricing, so that fluctuates with the price of the market, and a lot of the bigger importers tend to work on hedged pricing. And some of their coffees, so the same coffee that we would be buying, so our Fazenda Nunez, for example, we were buying last year, has literally doubled, over doubled now actually, in price if we were to buy it spot. So a year ago it was half what it is now, which is mental. So our prices have gone up only by about 15%, I think, on overall. I think it's about 15%, which we've done very well too. But I know a lot of other people are going to struggle from that. But is there good news as well? Yes, kind of. If we can get a stable price, I think, you know, the coffee market will come down eventually, probably next year. It's what a lot of people are speculating. 2026, like probably towards the end of 2026, we'll start to see that market come back down, and it should stabilize over $2, which would be great, because that's more manageable for roasters, but it's also more manageable for producers. If it stays even higher, then even better for producers, because the higher the base price is, the more money coffee producers are getting. And I think that would also mean that coffee shops, coffee roasters, everybody, we need to adjust to a new pricing of coffee. I also believe that coffee has been way undervalued for a very, very long time, for what it should be. We're essentially talking about the seed of an exotic fruit. I've kind of stolen that from Stuart that I recommended earlier, but he's very right, and it's something that I have thought about. I've just not been able to articulate it for a while. And the amount of work that goes into coffee is incredible when you actually see it and talk to people about it. The things that they go through and the work that goes into it is insane. So if we can sustain a higher price for coffee in the long term, it will be great. Coffee producers will have a better life. There'll be a lot greater return on their coffees, and we will have better coffees overall for a longer period, particularly if climate change keeps going the way it is and we're going to have less fertile soil or less areas that are good for growing coffees on. A higher price is what's needed for coffee to be a sustainable crop. And at the end of the day, consumers, us, end consumers, coffee shops, we're all just going to have to get used to a more expensive cup of coffee, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think that's all I had, really. I hope I've explained this well enough. I feel like I've just waffled for a good 10-15 minutes. I've not done a YouTubing and just like monologue for ages. It's quite fun though. I intend to get back into YouTubing. I feel like I said that last time and it didn't go well, but I'm going to do it this time. Thank you for watching. Please do send any questions in YouTube comments and email comments. Don't phone me because I won't answer the phone. But yeah, I might update this again at another point and see how we're going with it. But essentially, coffee market's going up and we're having to deal with it as best we can. Good luck everyone. I'll see you soon. Bye.